What's up, my fellow programmers? In this video we are going to build this awesome advice generator app using React.js. In this video you will learn how to fetch data from an API, and you will also learn about states in React. So let's get coding. Okay, so to fetch an advice, we are going to be using this third-party API called Advice Slip JSON API. It's totally free. You don't have to worry about anything. So we are going to be using this URL specifically, and I'll leave a link in the description of this URL as well, so you guys can copy it from there. But you can check out this awesome website. It's very detailed. They also have many other endpoints as well. Okay, so I have the React app generated, but if you guys want to generate it for yourself, you need to make sure of one thing, that you have Node.js installed on your machines. And if you have that, you can just run this command on the directory that you want to install that project and press enter. It will create that project. So that's how you guys can create a React app. But as I have it already generated, I've run it also using the npm start command as well. Okay, so I have my React app running here, and so let's open up this src folder. Let me increase the font size a bit. Okay, so I'll just remove this logo as I don't need it. So yeah, I'll also remove it from here, and yeah, I think it's enough for now. Okay, it's compiling. Okay, so let's just go and open up the endpoint. Okay, so yeah, this is the endpoint that I need. And okay, so the first thing I'll do is create a function, simple function. So I'll call it fetch advice. Okay. Let's make it a callback function. Okay, so this is the endpoint that I need. Okay, so first I'll create a request option object, have method that as get and redirect of color. Okay, and then I'll the fetch function. I'll paste my URL here and pass this request options here. Then I'll call a promise that I want the response. Okay, response, convert it to response.json. Yeah, then call it in. Then I'll call it rest, and here I'll just unlock it, call it testing, press, call it here. Okay, and I'll also make this an synchronous function. Let's await here. Now what this does is that when it's fetching, it waits for this function to complete. So once it's done, then it like calls the promise. So that's why we are using the async await function, so that it doesn't go into the promise before it has completed. So yeah, and we have the console log here as well. Okay, now let's just call a use effect. Okay, and call the function here fetch advice. Okay, so we pass this array here, this empty array here, because this means that this should only be called once when the component mounts. So this is similar to component did mount in class component in React.js. Okay, so I think, yeah, it has been imported. Okay, now let's check our console logs. So I'll open up the you can open it using inspect as well. So, and I'll go to the console tab. So we are getting this testing the res. I'll open it. Okay, and as you can see that we have a slip object in here. So now let's call it like res.slip. Okay, now we are just getting the data. So I think we only need this advice variable or like field from this object. So let's call that advice here as well. Advice. Okay, now we are just getting the advice here. I hope it's clear that we are getting the response, and in the response I'm just like pointing to that specific field that I want to use. Okay, now I want to show it here, but how can I do that? So for that I will need a state, so I can use a React useState hook. So yeah, okay, so I'll call it advice and set advice it, and let's set it as null beginning. Set advice, and I'll pass the same thing here as well. So I'll pass res.slip.advice. Okay, now I have it here, and I'll just call this state inside this p tag. So advice. Okay, now if we see it, we are getting the response from the API, and we are able to display it. So now it's complete, but let's add a button which when we click on it, we are able to like refetch it. Like if I want a new advice, right now if I want that new advice, I would have to refresh the app. So I just don't want to, you know, like keep refreshing it. So let's add a button, and I'll say here get new advice, or anything you'd like to mention, like you can add here. So I'll on click. So on click is an event handler in React.js, which this means that when this button gets clicked, fire up this function. So I'll just call this fetch advice function here. Fetch advice. I think the spelling is correct. Yeah, it's correct. Okay. And now if I press it, I think it should fetch it. Yeah, it's fetching it, add a loading as well. So to do that, we will create a new state, call it loading, and set loading. Okay, so use state, and let's set it as true. So, and let's take this loading variable here. Loading. Okay, so I'll make it not loading. So this is a ternary operator. This means so this is similar to if else statement. So this means that I am currently writing if loading is equals to false, advice, and else loading. So if you are not able to understand this and you guys are familiar with if else statement, these both are same, but as you can see that we are able to write it in a single line. So we and the JSX like supports ternary operators. So this is also called as conditional rendering. I can also do it like this, like loading, and I could just replace it here like twice and just call up that loading here. So yeah, both ways are fine. Now if we check here, okay, yeah, we are just getting that loading, but it isn't like reverting back or like showing us our advice. So to do that, we have to set this state to false, and we can do that by turning it false after the advice has been saved in the set advice, or updated rather in the set advice state. So now if I press it, okay, now it's not like turning on again. So to do that, I call this set loading at the start of the function and set it as true. Now if I press it, now as you just saw that it was loading and then it stopped. Okay, so yeah, it's working now. The loading is working fine. Now the functionality of the app is pretty much done. Let's add some styling to it. So the first thing that I'll do is we go to my app.css file and check. Okay, so we don't have it here. So I'll style the tag and I'll make the color as I don't it here. And h1, I want the color to, let's make it blue for now, but we'll update it. Let's also set a margin bottom of 0, so we don't get that default margin that we get with these h1 tags. And let's see it. Okay. I don't currently have a h1 tag, so let's add it. Let's call it advice generator, or anything you'd like to call it. Okay, the color is a bit harsh. Okay, so I found a color online, so I'll be using that color for the h1 tag, and yeah, I think this looks much better now. Okay, now to style the button, so I'll create a new class called btn, and I'll just copy this code. But if you guys are interested, it's padding of 10 pixels, border radius of 20. I've set the background color, the border is 1 pixel, and the text color is this, and I've also set a margin top, and I refresh it. So now the button should be, okay, I didn't set the class on the, yeah, here I have to close I have to call the class name here as well, so I'll call it btn. Now if we see, okay, now let's just update the background, and to update that, yeah, app header, background color, I've changed it, and now we have this cool looking color as well. Okay, so yeah, this is pretty much it. One small thing that I forgot to implement was the catch function. So to implement that, I'll just set up I'll just call this dot catch, and let's just set up a log, and let's say error, and I'll use the console dot error. Show it here. Oh, and one more thing was that this needed to be a callback function, so I'll just paste all of this inside of this function. Okay, yeah, so we also have this callback function set up as well, and we do have to set the loading as false as well. Now I would love to see what you guys come up with. Like, you guys can use a lot of other APIs as well. There are some like great websites like Rapid API, which have like a lot of free APIs for you guys to use. So I would love to see what projects you guys can come up with. If you want the code for this project, you guys can find it in the description below. And so yeah, this is it. And if you guys have any questions or any video suggestions, do let me know in the comments down below as well. Thank you so much for watching the video. Do like and subscribe. This is Rayan Abid signing off.